What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and thanks for joining me for another episode where I get to sit down with more incredible humans and get to know their deeper story. Today, I am sitting down with an Olympian for the first time ever on this channel. She's been to the Olympics twice, wears a bronze medal around her neck from Team USA in rugby. It is Kristi Kirshe. Her and I get to know how she got involved with rugby, and just 2 years after her first practice was on Team USA. We dive deeper into her athletic background, from playing soccer all the way through college, from being on an all-boys football team, and just the journey of what really led her to having so much success in the rugby space. We talk about the growth of the sport and the trajectory right now as we have more eyes on the sport of rugby than we've ever had, and even some of the changes in the conversation that we're having and what it means to be feminine, what it means to be beautiful with muscles. And we just get to know her as a person, and I'm so excited to welcome her on the show. Make sure you like, subscribe, send this to a friend, help the channel grow, and without any further ado, let's welcome in Kristi. Kristi, you are my first rugby player, my first Olympian that I've had on the show. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
When you think about going to the Olympics, not once, but twice, when you think of yourself as a little girl growing up, is that something that you ever went up to your parents and was like, hey, I want to win a medal. I want to go to the Olympics?
I think when I was a little kid, I definitely dreamed about it, but I always dreamed about it for soccer. So the fact that I found a way to do it through a different sport that I started so late, I don't think I could have explained that to myself when I was a little kid, but it was definitely always a dream. I always told my parents, I think this is when I was a little bit older, but not like a little kid, but I always told my parents, if I ever get a tattoo, it's going to be because I go to the Olympics and I'm going to get the rings. And I don't think they ever realized that it would actually be a serious thing that I ended up doing. So I think that
So
was
then
pretty cool.
how far after going to the Olympics did you make an appointment with a tattoo artist to get the rings?
I got them the week I got back from Tokyo. And it was my first, I had never gotten a tattoo before. I didn't really know the process. I just on a whim DM'd a bunch of tattoo shops in San Diego, and I was like, "Hey, just got back from the Olympics. I'm looking to get the rings." And I went to the first one that would book me, and I got really lucky because I had a really great tattoo artist. He was the shop's fine line specialist, and I was like,
Oh,
"Sounds great to
perfect.
me." A lot of things went right for me to get that tattoo right away, but I did not tell my parents I got it until after I got it. So I sent them the photo of it being done, and I was like, "Oh, I finally did
Mm.
the thing." But I didn't want to tell them beforehand because I didn't want the chance of them be like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
Headset knew I was gonna do that as soon as I got back.
It's funny you say that because I remember, before I went to college, I thought about getting a tattoo, and I only have one, and I got it maybe a couple of years ago, so as an adult very much, but my parents did not support tattoos. I remember my dad saying, "Here are the things. Don't come home pregnant, don't come home if you've dropped out, and don't come home if you got a tattoo." Those were the big 3 things.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in a household that very much had the mindset around tattoos that they didn't want you to get one?
I think we never talked about it that much, but I'm the youngest of 3. Neither of my older siblings have a tattoo or anything. I think my brother was debating some of them at some point, but always kind of never did it. So it was more of a no one else has one, so it's I'd be the first one to get one. So it was just, yeah. So I wouldn't say they were oh my god, you can't get a tattoo, but I think they were very more well, you should think about X, Y, and Z, getting a job and everything. I think more from a practicality standpoint than anything else.
Then what was that family dynamic growing up with your siblings, playing sports? Where do you fall in, are you the oldest, middle, youngest?
I'm the baby, and I'm the baby by a good amount of years. My sister is 8.5 years older than me, and my brother is 7 years older than me. So I always say like I grew up as a sideline kid, like both my siblings played a ton of sports. So like I grew up on the sidelines. Like I was the little kid running around on the sidelines, being a ball girl for my sister's high school soccer team. Like I was just always on the sidelines. So I was always at sporting events and I think like chasing my older siblings around, which is like a huge reason why I ended up playing all the sports I did was because they played all the sports that they did. So yeah, I'm the youngest of three.
Was there ever then a consideration? I'm sure like sports were just ingrained in you, but did you have any of like those art side of the brain skills? Like, can you draw? Can you sing? Can you play an instrument, act, any of that? No.
Literally all my skills went towards being an athlete, I think. Like when I was a kid, I liked to like color and stuff, but the creativity, like I can copy something, but like the creativity of like creating something from scratch,
Mm.
absolutely not. Like it all went towards being an athlete. And I think, I did grow up in a very athlete centric household. Like both my parents were athletes, both my parents played soccer at Cornell. And then yeah, like my brother he played football, he wrestled and played basketball, and he played lacrosse like all the way through high school. And then my sister, same thing, she played soccer, she did gymnastics, and she played lacrosse like all the way through high school. So me growing up, it was I played every single thing I could get my hands on. Like I played soccer. I mean, my mom always jokes that I started kicking a soccer ball the day I started walking. It was just like so ingrained in me that way. And then like, so I always played soccer, and then I played lacrosse because my sister played lacrosse. And then, I quit being a kid ballerina dancer to go play tackle football because my brother played football and I thought that looked so much cooler. So like, pretty much everything I did was because they did it, and I was just chasing them basically my entire childhood. But none of us were very artistic, so I feel like I'd never had to chase them in that field.
It was always sports right from the
Yeah,
moment you were walking. But then
pretty much.
nobody in your
Yeah,
family played rugby. There's no lineage of
no,
rugby
absolutely not.
players.
Absolutely not. Yeah, no, absolutely not.
You also grew up in Massachusetts. Did you ever snowboard, ski, do any winter sports like that?
No, which is wild, I think. Well, it's funny now because at some point both my siblings learned how to ski or snowboard. And my parents or my dad like can grew up doing it as well. So like now my family goes on like ski trips every year because my sister's kids are actually really into it.
Oh,
And
cool.
I'm over here like, when the heck did everybody learn how to do this? Because I absolutely not. I think I've been snowboarding twice in my life, but it was just always one of those things where it's like I was always in season, because I was playing all these sports. I was always in season, so like never got to do it. But like somehow the rest of my family found time, just not me. Somehow it just missed me apparently in growing up.
Okay, so no snowboarding or skiing until a little
No.
bit later in life. What is the then checklist of all of the sports you've done? And if you're able to add them in the order in which you found them?
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know that's a lot.
Soccer and basketball definitely were the first two. Um, I think soccer, basketball, and I played like t-ball when I was a little kid. So like soccer, basketball, baseball. Then we add in lacrosse there somewhere in there. So, and then we add Pop Warner football. Um, yeah. So I think Pop Warner, and then I played soccer, basketball, lacrosse all the way through high school. Then I played college soccer, and then we add rugby when I was like 23. So like a long time before rugby came into the picture, and a lot of sports in
Yeah.
the in between before I found my sport, I guess ultimately.
What sport that you've done do you feel like has set you up most for success in rugby?
I think it's definitely a combination of things. I always say like rugby was the sport that I was waiting to find my entire life, and I just didn't even know it, because I think it's such a great combination of so many different sports. And like especially in the US, most kids don't grow up playing rugby. It's not really an option. we're hoping to change that, but like right now it's not really an option. So a lot of us are like later crossovers into the sport. But I think part of the reason why like I was able to cross over to it so well and so quickly was that I learned how to make a form tackle and I learned how to throw a stiff arm when I was 7 years old playing football. So I think that that's like a really huge part. Um, because I think so many people like crossing over into rugby, you know, if you come just from a background of like playing soccer or playing basketball, the contact element can actually be the hardest part to transition to because it's like the most different
Oh.
from what you've done before. So I already had that. So like I already had that kind of ingrained in me. So that was huge. But I think soccer and basketball, I think probably are the most similar to like adapting to rugby and the hand-eye skills and like the fitness that you need in order to like be really good, I think.
That's interesting because I would think soccer, but basketball isn't really the sport that comes to mind. And even as I've started to watch rugby more and sideline report for the Women's Elite Rugby League, watching and understanding rugby has been a process. And the best
Yeah.
thing that I can compare it to is it's somewhat of a mix of soccer and football, but to me with way more intricacies with the sport. Do you think that's fair? Or how would you explain it to somebody who maybe has never watched rugby before?
I think I don't think you can say rugby has more intricacies than football because football changes its rules every year and we all figure it out in order to watch the NFL, you know? So like
Fair.
there's so many micro rules in football. We've just grown up with them that we all know them.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think, but I do think because we like so many of us come to rugby so much later, there are so many rules that are just different from how we expect them to be because of football. Like for me, like when I first started playing, I knew absolutely nothing about rugby, like not a thing. It took me a long time to know the rules. I think if you ask me today, there's probably still some rules that I can't fully explain to somebody else. But I think kind of being like it's like football with no pads, but you can only throw the ball backwards and it's constant. There's no breaks. I think is usually like what I
Mhm.
try to tell people because I think that's like a really important like character distinction too is that
Yeah.
you know there's no downs, you don't stop. It's kind of like a continuous running kind of game, much like soccer where it's just like it's kind of free flowing for the whole time, which is very different from how we like know football.
Talking about football, you played and on an all
Yeah.
boys team.
Yeah.
What was that conversation like when you approached your parents and told them that you wanted to play?
Honestly, like I give so much credit to my parents because I don't even think they batted an eye. You know, I they had put me in dance in like, you know, like little girl ballerina
Oh,
classes
yeah.
because you know, everyone kind of went through that. And my sister had done that as well. So I feel like they put me in that and it just was very clearly not my thing. Not very good at it.
Did
Still
you have
wouldn't
2 left
claim
feet?
I wouldn't even say I got to having 2 left feet, you know, I was the little kid at the recital who I'm staring at everybody else because I just no part of my brain can intake, like, do this
Mm,
step, then do this step, then do this step, like, for some
yeah.
reason, it just would not math in my brain. So, I was just like, I don't know, and I've always been kind of built the way that I'm built, so, like, I didn't even look right in the little ballerina
Yeah,
outfit, you know,
yeah.
it just didn't look right, so but my parents were very big on like we had to fulfill whatever commitment we made. So I wasn't
Mm.
allowed to like quit dance during the year, but they were like, okay, next year you can go play football. And I remember being at like the end of the year recital and we were like, you know, backstage getting ready to do it, whatever. And all the moms were like, oh, are you so excited to come back next year? And I was like, no, I'm going to play football. And the look on some of their faces, I still remember that to this day. Like the look on some of their faces, some of them were like, oh, okay. But I was so excited about it. I was like so dead set on it. And like just so many kudos to my parents for being like, yeah, like, okay, if that's what you want to do, like you can do that. And so I'm really thankful that they, you know, were so down because I think at the time it was maybe a little bit more shocking than it would be today.
Well, and I think that it's incredible that you do have parents that are supportive too.
Yeah.
We're not going to put a gender on a sport or a stereotype on a sport, and whatever, wherever your passion is, we want to support you. But when you're doing Pop Warner, what age is that? I know it's young.
Um, probably
8?
like probably like 7 to 11 maybe. I stopped playing, yeah, I think yeah, probably like 7 to 11, 7 to 12, something like that.
Then at that
Maybe.
age, you're getting some parents that maybe are raising an eyebrow, but what was the response, I guess maybe from other parents or peers or even the boys that were on your team? Do you remember?
I think that if there was like any kind of negative reaction, I was pretty shielded from that. I think it also helped that I was very good at it. So
Hell yeah,
like
you were.
yeah, like it was something that like, I started doing it and it just worked and it made sense and I was good at it, like I played quarterback and running back and linebacker. So like I played. Like it wasn't just like I was on the field. It was like no, like I
Mhm.
was playing. Um so I think that not to say that like you like girls shouldn't be playing football if they're not good at it, but like I think it helped especially at the time that I was good at it because there's like what are you going to say I can't play? I'm better than a lot of these kids at it. So it just like was something that was like I was naturally kind of good at and I really wanted to be there. So I think that that kind of helped, I don't know, silence the haters, I guess if you can say it that way, but um yeah, I just, not to brag, which I don't know if it is bragging, but
Oh,
I
not at
was good
all.
at it when I played.
I don't think there's anything wrong with identifying that you're good at something and showing it too. And I'm curious if you feel like that helped give you confidence and set you up for confidence later in life when it comes to sports, and whether you felt like you were the best person on that team or any other team you were, if that just helped you in a way to tell yourself, "Hey, I can do this. I know I'm athletic. Yeah, it's a new sport as you transitioned into other ones, but I have this really solid base."
That's an interesting question. I think I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time saying that I was the best one on some of these teams, and I don't know if that's just me as a person or if something I've kind of like ingrained kind of culturally that like you're not supposed to say you're the best at something. Might be a little bit of both, but like I have a hard time saying that. But I think objectively, you could look at some of the sports teams I was on, and I would say looking back, I was probably the best athlete on a lot of those teams. Um, I don't think I was always necessarily the most skilled person on a lot of teams. I think my athleticism like covered up a lot of, even in soccer, like my foot skills, not that great, but I was really good at being in the right place at the right time, which meant I was good at scoring goals. And so like I feel like my athleticism and just like, the way I'm built and just like kind of my overall being of it all, like allowed me to be like one of the most athletic people on a lot of fields that I was on growing up. Um, yeah, so I'm okay saying that. I'm okay saying I think I was one of the most athletic people in most of those fields.
Why do you think it is so hard to admit at times when you were the best? What is it about that?
I don't know. I just feel like I have this like thing that goes off in the back of my head of like, oh, you're supposed to be humble. Like, you're not supposed to be like self-aggrandizing or anything like that. I don't know. It just like goes off in the back of my head. And it's something that I've been trying to work on because there's a certain extent where it's like, no, like I am good at this. Like that is something about me. Like I am good at this. Like that is a fact. And I think even when it's a fact, sometimes it's hard for me to like stand on it. You know what I mean? But I'm trying to be better about it. So yeah.
Have you noticed that sentiment with teammates in these sports growing up and even now as an adult?
I think to a certain extent. I think there are some people who are really good at it, who are really good at being like, I am good at this. And I think there's a lot of other people where it might just kind of be the culture of sport. And it's like, if you, to a certain extent, if you think you're already the best, it's like, are you working hard enough to keep getting better? And I don't know if it's kind of that mentality that like we're kind of ingrained with, of like, there's always something you can get getting better at. There's always something you can be getting better at. And so it's almost like, maybe for me, it's almost like a fear of thinking I'm too good at something, because you don't want to get too comfortable in thinking you're good at something, I guess.
Yeah,
If that
it
makes sense?
it
Yeah.
seems similar to the thought of you never want to identify yourself as the smartest person in the room, because people will say, "Well, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Go find another
Exactly.
room where you can learn from more people." And I think saying you're the best in sports, well, then find another team where you can learn from other athletes could be the way of thinking.
Maybe like a little bit, or yeah, I think maybe a little bit, but I think I can confidently say, looking back as a kid, I was the best athlete on a lot of the fields that I stepped on, and I think it definitely has ended up serving me. I don't think I'm the most athletic person on the fields I step on now, but I think looking back, I think I could definitely say that pretty confidently.
You grew up with siblings in this super athletic household. You
Mhm.
go to college, you play soccer, and you also go for a degree in political science. You also spend a time being a lawyer, is that right?
I wasn't a lawyer. I was working in a law firm. I was kind of
Ah,
debating if
okay.
like if I was going to go the law school track. I think it's pretty common post political science degree to be like, oh, I'm going to go to law school. But yeah, so I went to college, played college soccer, graduated, got a 9 to 5 job working at a law firm, sitting at a desk, and absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it. I missed competing, and I for some reason, like, I felt like that part of me, like that part of my life wasn't over, and I think
Mhm.
a lot of people kind of go through this when their sport finally ends, and then they have to figure out who they are without it. And I was like, I'm not ready to be without it, actually. So I was struggling to like be somebody sitting at a desk, and I had this thought in the back of my head that like I like just this like nagging thought that I was like, I was not meant to be doing this. There's got to be something else that I was meant to be doing. And like most people, I complained a bunch to my friends.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, I don't think I should be sitting at a desk. I just kind of kept complaining. And luckily, my best friend from high school, she went to college at Boston University, and she played club rugby when she was in college, which was
Mhm.
kind of out of left field for her. She had been my soccer teammate. She had been my soccer co-captain when we were in high school, but she had played rugby in college. And she was like, hey, like a bunch of my friends still play. Maybe you should go give rugby a shot. And I was very against it. Like
Why?
I wish I could tell the story and be like, yeah, the second I heard the suggestion, I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I'm gonna go do that. No, I was like, I don't know. I'm a soccer player. Like, I'm not a rugby player. I don't know anything about rugby. I got through soccer without getting hurt. I don't know if I want to go play a different
Oh, yeah.
sport, like where I'm tackling people. I also think I had this nagging thing in the back of my head of like, I don't want to be bad at it. Like sports have always been the
Yeah.
thing that I was like good at, and like I got a lot of confidence from, like you said. But then I was like, if I have to go try a new sport that I've never played, like what if I'm terrible at it? And that scared me a lot too. So I said no, and I resisted it for probably 6 months before I finally was like, all right, I need to do something. And I decided to go to a practice. But like it took some convincing for me to get me on a rugby field.
What was that tipping point that did finally convince you?
I think it was a combination of, I had been playing like pickup soccer, and it just like was not enough. Like it was not scratching that competitive itch for me. And so I was just like, I need something that's more involved. And the rugby team, like they had practices like twice a week, and they had games on the weekend. So it's kind of more of like a schedule that I was used to, of like being on a team and being competitive. And at a certain point, I just was kind of like, I got to give something a try because this is not going to cut it. And I don't see another option like for me to be getting more competition in my life in this way. So that and some really good convincing from my friends to finally give it a shot. And I also wish I could tell the story and be like, I went to my first practice and it was like, this has been what I was waiting for. Like everything clicked and everything made sense, but like absolutely not. I went to my first practice and it was terrible. Like I was a mess. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't even know how to throw the rugby ball. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know anything. Like it was kind of a mess. Like I did look like an absolute fool, which was basically my worst nightmare.
Oh
But
no.
yeah, but like I always say this, but like, the rugby community is something incredibly special, and everyone on that team was like, "No, it's gonna be fine. Like, we'll help you. Like, we'll do extras with you." And like, they really took me under their wing, and like, we're like, "We think you can do this, and we're gonna help you get there." And it also didn't help that. So my first practice was in February in Massachusetts. So it was inside a basketball gym in the winter.
Oh, that sounds like not the best
No,
first
so it makes
taste
it
of a
like,
new sport.
yeah, so it makes it like extra confusing because it's like, you're not even on the field, you're not really getting a
Yeah.
sense of how things flow and all that kind of stuff. I can say that the time when I played my first outdoor game, when I like played my first rugby game, that's when everything clicked. And I was like, oh, I got this. Like, I understand this. Like, it was like once I was in space, once I had that ball and I was running down the field, I was like, oh, like, just like all the instinct kicked in. And it was like, oh, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. So, because from my first rugby practice to like 11 months later, I made my debut for the national team for like USA Sevens. So like it was like first practice, first outdoor game, one season, and then I got recruited to come out here. So it was like once it clicked, everything like really clicked for me, which was pretty crazy.
So then
I
how
really just
did
ran a lot with that question you asked me, and I'm sorry, but
No, that was perfect because it gave us so much of those details of how you got into rugby, and then, we
yeah.
see that you go to the Olympics in Tokyo 2 years later and you're on Team USA, and I'm just so curious how you got from going to your first practice, not being that great, not knowing the rules. What were all of those things that people don't see that really led to you making the Team USA?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like I said, like so many people on that first team were really so willing to take extra time with me to help me get to where I needed to be. Like so many people were willing to do extra skills and kind of stay after practice with me or get to practice early to kind of help me understand what was kind of going on. And I had people watching film with me and like trying to teach me like tactics and stuff like that. So it really was just like I got a lot of help from a lot of people, and it was kind of a community effort. But I also think like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really like look back and I feel like I feel really lucky because rugby like clicked the way it did, and because I played for this Boston team for like, so when I first started playing rugby, I started playing 15s, which is not the form that I
Yep.
play now. Which is obviously the WER
Mhm.
form. Um, and they just like kind of, at first, like I was just kind of thrown on the wing, and they were like, when you get the ball, run. And that was great for a little while. But so I basically played one season kind of in that position and like just kind of getting the hang of rugby. And then that summer, I played sevens for the first time. And so like playing sevens, that required like so much more conditioning and being so much better like with ball skills and like catch pass and all that kind of stuff. So that's where a lot of those extras that people were willing to do with me really started to come in. But it was like once it was like 15s went well, but then once I played sevens, I was like, oh my God, like there's so much space. I know, like, I know how to do this. I like totally get this. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there's more that has gone on behind the scenes once I've been out here training full time and part of like USA Rugby necessarily than like what went on behind the scenes to get me here,
Mm.
I guess, if that makes sense.
But I guess, like, what kept you coming back to practice if the first practice didn't really
But
go well? I know that things were clicking once you had your first match, but
yeah.
up until then, were your friends dragging you? Were they saying like, "Hey, you're gonna get the hang of it," or like, did you just want to give it the middle finger and say, "Nah, I'm going back to soccer and I'm gonna be a lawyer"?
No, I never once I went, I never ever thought about kind of quitting. I obviously when I first started playing rugby, I didn't think it was going to be something that like, took me out of working a 9 to 5. I thought it was just going to be like this nice additive hobby to my life.
Yeah.
But I kept coming back because I was like, oh, I am having fun. Even if I am not the best and I don't know fully what's going on, like I am having fun being in this type of environment again. And having this kind of athlete schedule and having practices multiple times a week, then like I was going to the gym every morning, and now I actually had something to train for. So it kind of like I fell almost instantly right back into like the rhythm of my life that I had known
The
before, like
routine.
the rhythm of being a
Yeah.
college athlete, the rhythm of being a student athlete pretty much my entire life. And it was like that rhythm really made me feel like me. And so I think that that really kept me in it, especially when I wasn't really the best yet. I was just like, oh, like my life feels like it's making sense to me again, as opposed to like
Mm.
before when I was kind of feeling like lost and, just kind of on the way to nowhere, kind of from like a training and everything type of perspective.
At what point were you then able to leave the law firm that you were working at and go all in to make this a career and your full-time profession as an athlete?
So, like I said, my first practice, February, um, and then I quit my job in start of October. So I don't know, what is that? 9 months, 8 months,
Yeah, a
something like
couple
that.
months.
Couple months, 6, 7 months. I don't know. I can't do that math that quickly, but
That's okay,
um,
me either.
but basically, honestly, like it wasn't like I quit my job because I knew I was gonna move out to. So we train full time out here in San Diego, California. That's where like the USA Women's Sevens team is. That's where we are full
Mhm.
time. We're here all year round. Um, and it wasn't like I quit my job because I knew I was going to get this opportunity. I actually had to quit my job because I got invited out to a camp out here and I didn't have any vacation days that I could take in order to
Oh,
come
wow.
to the camp that I was like basically being scouted at. So I kind of had to put all my eggs in the basket a little bit before I should have probably put all the eggs in the basket.
Luckily, it worked out.
Luckily, it worked
What a
out, but yeah, it
theory,
basically,
though.
I basically had used so many of my vacation days to play like sevens in the summer and to like go on these trips because club rugby, like you're flying around the country. So like I
Mhm.
had to, use all my days for that kind of stuff. And then I got invited out to a camp and I had no days left. And so it was basically like, well, looks like I got to quit my job. Looks like I have to give my notice so that I can go to this camp to try to get recruited basically to come out here full time because for me like once it became kind of an option in my head that this is something that I could do and that I could go to the Olympics for this,
Mhm.
it wasn't a dream I was going to let go of twice. It was
Yeah.
like I very much knew when I was starting to play, or when I started to realize that this was something I could do. I very much knew that I would regret it if I didn't go all the way in on it. And so yeah, I quit my job early just to be able to go to a camp to try to get scouted to come out here, and luckily it all went well and I did get invited to kind of move out here and be out here full time, but it was definitely a risk I had to take. And it was definitely something I had to convince my parents made sense at the time.
So you didn't wait to tell them until after, like you did with the tattoo? You told them before you quit the job?
I told them before I quit my job. It did take me a few weeks for me to sit them down and tell them I was playing rugby because I knew that
Okay.
they would be nervous about me playing rugby. So that did take me a few weeks, but I felt like I needed to tell them that I, quit my job before
Yeah.
I did it because I'd be like, "Hey, I might end up on your couch in a couple weeks. Who knows? But I just quit my job."
We're going to do our best and we're going to try not to end up on
Yeah.
mom and dad's couch, but this is what we're doing.
Yeah. No, but I think as soon as my parents realized too that this was something I could like run with, they were like all in on supportive of it. Um, they just were a little bit more practical than me maybe at the beginning, but I think once they realized like how much this mattered to me and kind of the opportunity that I kind of had found for myself, they were like, absolutely go for it. And I think that they've kind of been like that my entire life, kind of like going back to how they were when I started playing football. They've been like,
Yeah.
all right, if that's what you want to do, you got to do it. And I think that that's just such a cool way to be as a parent. And I'm really grateful that they were that way.
And even going back to how quickly you were able to get good enough at rugby to be on Team USA at the Olympics. We talk about how this community, and I agree from all of my experience with the rugby community, everybody is very much willing to help and educate and get more eyes on the sport. But did you get any pushback from, and whether it was athletes, the community, maybe even media, when you were one of the athletes that was chosen to be on the team, knowing that you're still very much early in playing the sport of rugby?
No, no, not really any pushback. No, I mean, I think I I have been very blessed in my rugby career that from the second I got out here, I I kind of was good enough and learned fast enough to be able to kind of be on the series right away.
Okay.
So I
Mhm.
started playing on like our World Series. My debut was January of 2019. So that next season, like I went on my first tour. I played barely that many minutes, but I was taught quick enough and learned fast enough in order to kind of be there and to kind of make the most of those opportunities like early on. And so I was able to become kind of a regular for the team very soon after I became part of the team. So like in that lead up to those Olympics, I wouldn't say that it was shocking that I was part of that Olympic team. I think, I had definitely put in the work and the hours and had the resume on the team in order to be like a very confident choice going into that Olympics, especially at the time.
And we can even say that Olympics, because that wasn't the only Olympics you've been to. You
No.
then won the bronze medal in 2024. I mean, what a really cool trajectory, and even just, again, still very much early in your career. Like, when you if you now look back at your very first practice to that moment when you're standing there with your teammates with a bronze medal around your neck, what emotions kind of go through your mind, and are there flashbacks, or just take me back to then?
Yeah, I mean, it was like the accomplishment of the something I couldn't have even dreamed of a few years before. Like when I couldn't when I was in college, I couldn't have even dreamed such a thing for myself. So to be there and to be standing there on the podium playing a sport that I did barely even knew existed, a few years before, I think it was like the craziest of all crazy dreams. And it was like, I can say to an extent it was my childhood dream, but I can't even say that I ever expected it to be for this sport. So like I can't even really claim that. So really it was like the wildest of wild dreams. And I definitely had flashbacks. almost I had a lot more what ifs. Like, what if I hadn't decided to go to that first rugby practice? Like, what would my life be like now? Like, and thank goodness I did, because now I'm standing here, just played in my second Olympics. I played every single minute of every single game of the Olympics. And it's like, it's crazy to look back at that kid who didn't even know the rules of rugby to now this kid who, was on the field all the time in this like journey to, accomplishing this wildest dream. It's hard to like think about it. Well, it's not hard to think about it. I think about it probably every single day. It's hard to wrap up all that emotions, like the disbelief and the excitement and like the joy and just like the wildest feeling of accomplishment of all time. And just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, I'm probably going to start crying if we keep talking about it, but it just was like the moment of all moments, and just such a moment that I couldn't have even dreamed of a few years before. And that felt like the craziest part to me.
I mean, this is so few people get to experience what you're experiencing and what you have accomplished. So I think getting emotional about it is an incredibly normal response. And, we can sit here and talk about all of these like awesome achievements and the things that clicked and made it work. But I also imagine that there were challenges along the way and maybe more moments of what ifs, or maybe obviously not ending injuries, but little tweaks. So what were some of those challengers or speed bumps along the way that actually shaped you for who you were able to become?
I mean, I think there's just so many, like, yeah, like different varieties of injuries, ankles, knees, little things, thumbs. Rugby's like a full contact sport, so there's so many, you're kind of dealing with little things all the time. And then, I had an ankle that kept me out for like 4 months, I think the year after the Tokyo Olympics. I had different varieties of injuries. The year of the Olympics, that fall, I actually broke my face because I took a knee to the face in a tackle, and like I broke
What?
part of my face. Just kind of really random, different types of injuries. And I feel like it's just kind of very rugby. Those are just kind of things that you kind of deal with and then you kind of move on. But definitely like had my share of injuries from the sport. But I also think like it it's very hard to be in this type of environment. It's very hard to be in this type of environment full time. We have a team, we have a training group probably of 24 ish women, and only 12 or 13 will go on a tour. And so we're kind of constantly in a competitive environment, and at the same time you're trying to build a culture and be a team, but on the other time it's an elite sport, and you're kind of constantly kind of competing for a position. So I think there's so many, and we had so many hiccups. I had hiccups as an individual along the way. You lose confidence, you get confidence back, you feel like you're playing well. All of a sudden, you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And, we have coaching changes and all these types of things happen along the way. But then also, so many things happen as a team. We had a really good qualifying year, which would have been the year of 2022, 23. No, 21, 22. No, 22, 23. 22, 23. Sorry.
That's okay. Numbers are hard for me too.
It's like like I know the cycle dates, because it was a
Mhm.
3-year condensed cycle from Tokyo to Paris. And so like I know the cycle dates, but when I have to say the numbers out loud, it always gets wrong, or the years out loud. But we had a really good qualifying year, but then we struggled a lot actually the year of the Olympics. We had a lot of like sixth place finishes, fifth place finishes.
Mhm.
We're losing against the Australias and the New Zealands of the world kind of consistently. Like even thinking about our final game, we're playing against Australia, who we've probably played 5 times that year, and we've lost every other game. So there were so many things that we went through as a team, and so many gut checks, and so much that happens behind the scenes that people don't really see. They only really see the end product of, you know, winning a
Yeah.
medal and making it to the podium and everything. But yeah, you know, I mean, I've had my fair share, and I think also the team has been through just so many ups and downs together. But um, yeah, I don't know if that actually answered the original question, but
Yeah,
I think it's in there somewhere.
it did, and I think it's really interesting. I didn't realize that, you have this full team and then it's condensed, so it is
Mhm.
essentially like a tryout all the time, but you're
Yeah,
also teammates with these people and you wanna build morale and you wanna be close to them, and I can't even imagine how do you keep your brain on straight? Do you guys all work with mindset coaches or
yeah.
how have you been able to go through that barrier of, "Hey, I wanna be friendly with these people that are on my team, but I also wanna beat them because I'm a competitor and I want the spot on the team." Like, that's a really hard game to play with yourself.
I think, you know, right after we have a sports psych who works with us kind of consistently. But I think a really important question that we kind of sat down as a team and talked about after the Tokyo Olympics was, do you want to be an Olympian, or do you want this team to win a medal at the Olympics? And I
Mhm.
think that's like a really important line in the sand, because it's I think our team sport especially is very different than a lot of other team sports. Like, I think rugby is the ultimate team sport because basically nothing can happen in the game of rugby where you're not relying on your teammates to help you out in some way. You know, you carry the ball, you're relying on them to get over you the second you get tackled so that the ball can stay on your side. You know, you miss a tackle, you're relying on them to make the tackle and then for you to kind of cover for them. So it's kind of constantly a game in which you have to fully trust the people around you. So you have to be on that field being like, I want the team to do the best that the team can do. And I think that that carries in to how we train and to into our environment of like, you know, I'm going to do everything that I can do to make sure that this team is on the podium when we get to Paris. And I think that that was a conversation that we kind of had often of, you know, I'm going to do my best so that the people around me are forced to do their best so that this team is going to be ready to compete for a medal. And I think that you kind of have to be that selfless in this kind of environment in order for the team to have any semblance of success. But yeah, I do think that was like, and I remember that conversation so specifically because I almost think to an extent going into Tokyo, there was part of me that was like, I want to be an Olympian. You know, I want to make it to the Olympics. I want to be an Olympian. And I think really I had a personal mindset. And then not that I wasn't focused on the team performance and cared about how the team was going to do and everything, but in the back of my head, I knew that there was like, I wanted to be an Olympian. And I think
Mhm.
going into Paris, it was so much of a mindset shift for me, especially like specifically to be like, no, like I want this team to do well, whether I get hurt the month before the Olympics and the team has to go on without me or whatever. I want this team to do well. And so I think that that has been kind of how we've built this culture of our program of like, this is where we want the team to be. So what are we gonna do in order for the team to be there?
Mm, that makes a lot of sense, and I think building a culture like that is only going to help the sport grow, and rugby, specifically women's rugby, is something that we are really finally seeing a push, and it is becoming more mainstream. I mean, there was a recent record-breaking number of 4.6 million viewers that tuned in to the Women's Rugby World Cup on opening weekend. Like, that is nothing to just, like, look at and ignore. There is something in the air that
Mm-hmm.
is creating this cultural shift when it comes to rugby. What do you think needs to happen in order to keep that trajectory growing and really make it something that, the way that we grew up with football and understand the rules, that people now, kids now, can grow up and understand the rules of rugby?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly capitalizing on the momentum. And I think, we always talked about, just from rugby in the US, like we always talked about as a program, the best way for us to get eyes on rugby, was for us to do well at the Olympics, because for the US audience, that's like the biggest stage that rugby is going to be seen on. So I think it's been really cool that, especially in the US, we have seen a response to that. We've seen more girls signing up for rugby, more girls joining college, just so many more women kind of coming out and be like, hey, like I want to play this sport. It's kind of a badass sport. And I think that that's been really cool to see. And I think also I think women's rugby especially, I think has so many things going for it in the United States. We're not competing with football in the way that men's rugby is going to compete with football. So it's like, what other sport are women going to be full tackling each other, and are women celebrated for being strong and powerful in this specific way? Not really that many other sports in the US. So I think that we have that going for it. And I also think rugby personalities and like all the people that play rugby, I think that that's been one of the biggest draws for so many people getting into the game. Is I like we did a good job at the Olympics, but I also think like you have to credit Alona Mar for how much she's done for the sport, and
Oh yeah.
how much storytelling she's doing, and how much she's showing this world of rugby, and like what rugby players are like, and how powerful and feminine and how confident rugby can make you as a person. And so I think like she's done so much for the game, and I think it's just continuing to capitalize on the momentum and like telling the stories of the people playing, and starting to build grassroots rugby, the way in other countries, kids grow up playing rugby like we grow up kind of playing soccer. And so like kind
Yeah.
of capitalizing on the momentum and just kind of continuing to build the grassroots, so that people aren't being like, what is rugby, how does rugby work, and people actually are seeing it for the first not for the first time, but seeing it on their TVs. And I think this Rugby World Cup has been really huge for that. The deal with CBS and Paramount is getting it more mainstream and easier for people to find and easier for people to see. And I think just increasing that access is so huge for kind of continuing to build the momentum of this sport. And I think the next few years for rugby in the US is huge. We have a home Olympics. We have LA 2028 coming in a few years. So like huge opportunity for us to kind of keep showing America who we are. And also we have a men's and women's World Cup coming to the US beginning in the 2030s. So like the next 10 years for rugby in America is just like a huge opportunity to kind of keep growing and keep showing everyone like how awesome rugby is.
Do you think that that's what it will take, is having the World Cup and the Olympics, the Rugby Olympics in the States? Is that what is going to be the tipping point to, get rugby in middle schools and high schools, and have more colleges do it as a not professional sport, but a college sport rather than a club sport? Or do you think that it's going to take longer for that trickle down effect?
I think it's going to play a big part of it. I think demand is so important to how, sports grow, And you're starting to see rugby as a varsity sport, like especially at some of the Ivy League schools, and there's a lot of schools that are starting to have rugby as a varsity sport, but you got to kind of show the demand for like any change to kind of happen. And I think, continuing to tell the rugby stories and continuing to have rugby on TV, and we always want, like, we want young girls to see it and be like, hey, I want to do that someday. And even just you see this with soccer too, but like girls nowadays are growing up with the idea that they could be a professional athlete in a way that wasn't necessarily the standard when when you and I were younger. So I think you know showing people that it is something that you can do, and it's something you can be a professional at, and just kind of growing the awareness and the opportunity. I think and I think that that's such a huge thing that the Olympics and that the World Cups do, is like showcase that like this is possible. Like, look at it. This is possible. You can do this. And so I do think that like home Olympics and home World Cups, I think, then you get people coming to see rugby in a way that they haven't really ever been able to. We play a World Series. I mentioned it earlier, but like we play a World Series every year. We play 9 stops all around the world, and one of them is a U.S. stop. But most of those tournaments that we're playing are, internationally. So they're at 2 a.m. in the morning U.S. time, and you're not going to
Yeah.
get a lot of people seeing that and watching that, even if they want to, just because of that situation. So the more rugby we can have happening in the US and the more people we can have seeing it in the US, I only think that that's just going to grow the sport in a
And I
huge
think you
way.
make a really interesting point that I never actively thought of until you said it. But yeah, when I was growing up as a little girl, I didn't think, oh, maybe I can be a professional athlete. It was, no, maybe I can be a professional dancer or figure
Mhm.
skater, or I can be an actress in Hollywood. That never would have ever panned out. But you know what I mean? Like you're
Hey, you never know.
thinking,
You still could.
I can't remember lines for shit, so I think that ship is sailed. Maybe if they have like ad-libbing and say whatever you want, that's the only time that it would work for me. But I do think that that's really interesting that now kids are growing up seeing more women in sports, that it could be a real possibility. When you were growing up and knowing that, you played football, soccer, now rugby, did you ever deal with like the stereotypes of, oh, I'm playing sports that aren't super feminine and muscles aren't attractive. That's what boys have, or any of that kind of dialogue or conversation from people?
I don't know if necessarily from other people, but I think I had some internal level of it of why do I look so different from all the other girls my age? Like I'm not skinny like the rest of them, I don't look like they look, I don't fit into 00 jeans, like, kind of all
Either.
those. No, but like it was such a
Yeah.
thing when, we were in like middle school and stuff like that. And so I think honestly, and I'm sure that comes from the external world that I'm growing up in, but I think a lot of
Mhm.
it was more like internal dialogue of, I don't look like everybody else. Why don't I look like everyone else? Well, I'm good at sports, but like, what does that matter? Like, if and so I think I had a lot of internalized versions of that, of like, oh, I don't look like everyone else. Oh, I'm more muscular than everyone else, or all those types of things. And yeah, so I think it was very internal for me, kind of that dialogue. But I think, and I think I even felt that almost all the way through playing college soccer. I'm like, I'm bigger than other people, I'm a little bit more aggressive than other people. And sometimes people look at me a certain way when we're playing, and, you know, stuff like that. And I just think like I never really looked like a lot of soccer players. And that was definitely something that like I knew in the back of my head. And I think did cause some insecurities for me growing up, like clothes don't fit me like they fit other girls. I can't wear X, Y, and Z and all that kind of stuff. But I think that was one of the best things about finding rugby, because I found rugby and everyone was like, "Oh my god, you're so strong. Oh my god, that's awesome." Like, "Oh my god, like you can hit so hard," and stuff like that. And so I think it was like the first time in my life that it was fully externally celebrated. And I think that that's such a cool thing about rugby in general, is like you are so celebrated for how strong and powerful you are. And I think that that did so much for my confidence as a person, and like in my own skin and in my own body, that I think no other sport, I think growing up, really transcended that in the same way that rugby had for me.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And when I was covering one of the women's elite rugby matches, I was wearing a dress and you could see my thighs. And I've got big, thick, muscular thighs, and one of the girls on the team afterwards, she was like, "Oh, you got some good thick legs. You should come try rugby." And it's
Yes.
crazy because growing up, it was like, "Oh, she's got thunder thighs, like, her legs are so
Yep.
big, like, she doesn't fit in her dance costumes or the leotards with the tights." And then when the athlete said that to me, I just thought, wow, how cool is it to be celebrated for your strength and what you have?
Yeah, I think it's so healing in a way, you know. I
Oh
think growing up, we were so told that your body is supposed to look a certain way because this is how, you know, the models wearing the clothes look, and this is how people look in society. And then to be playing a sport where like you're celebrated for what your body can do,
yeah.
I think did so much for
It's
me as a
huge.
person. It was so healing for like my inner child, you know. I even remember like going back to my football days, you know, we had to weigh in before every game in Pop
Oh
Warner, you know,
man.
just to make
Yep,
sure that
those
like
days.
kids are kind of the same size. And I remember, you know, like I was growing faster than some of the boys, you know, like that I was playing against. And I remember being so self-conscious before games sometimes of like having to be weighed in before, you know, and I think it's just so interesting to think back on that and then to be like, you know, now my rugby teammates and I are like getting on each other. It's like, oh, you look too lean. Like you gotta be eating more. Like you can't be losing muscle like that. You know, like and just to think about how that mentality has shifted playing this sport and especially for me as an individual, like, oh, like I don't have to be tiny. Like, no, I'm actually being really celebrated for being strong and for having muscles and everything like that. So I think it's for me, it's been so incredibly healing.
What would you then tell your younger self from everything you've learned now and knowing that you've accomplished so much and you can celebrate your body for what it does? Like what would you go back and tell the younger Kristi?
It's a really good question. I think I would just tell myself to be who you are. You know, stop trying to be what you think everybody else wants you to be and just like be who you are and like embrace what that means, you know? Be the most athletic person on the field, you know, be powerful, like be who you are. Like don't worry about being silly, don't worry about being goofy, like be who you are. Like there is such a place for you in this world and like you're going to find it, but be who you are.
Oh, I love that. I just got chills. We should all tell our younger selves that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like, you know, I'm sure some of it comes with age, but I also think some of it comes with confidence is just, you know, being confident enough to just be who you are and not try to be whatever the people expect you to be, you know?
Mhm.
I think that that's I wish even a few years ago I could give myself more of that and be like, stop thinking so much about what other people are thinking about you and just exist. No one's thinking about you as much as you're thinking about yourself. So just like
Oh,
go be
yeah.
a person, you know?
That's the best thing you can remind yourself is, like, you care about all of these little things more than everybody else. Nobody's thinking about you like that, or most people aren't unless they're, like, terrible humans.
Unless you're like a super hater on you and then like, why do you care what they think anyway, you know?
Right. You're not gonna go to them for advice anyways for anything in life, so
Right. Right.
continue on. I don't wanna put words or ideas in your mouth, so knowing that the Olympics is coming to Los Angeles in 2028, is that the next goal? Is that what you're looking to do? Where's your head at around that?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. That's the next dream for me. I mean, I think, you know, I've been on this team. You know, we actually had a really big turnover in our team post Paris. You know, that the group that went to Paris and won the bronze medal, that we had basically been together as like a core group for my entire career. So we had a lot of retirements and a lot of people who kind of that was the end of their rugby journey. And so we kind of have like a really young new team now. And, you know, I've gone from being the new kid on the block to now, you know, I'm captaining the team this year. I'm the oldest person on the team. And so, like, I've really kind of come full circle in kind of this rugby journey. And so I think it's really exciting to be kind of looking at a new challenge of like, okay, like now I feel so much more responsibility for how this team is going to do in the next 3 years. And, you know, going into LA 2028 and yeah, I mean, that's definitely the goal. And I think that the next dream is like, okay, we won a bronze medal. Like, let's win a gold medal in LA. And like, what is it going to take to get there? So that's absolutely the goal. And that's absolutely my plan right now.
And even speaking to saying that you're the oldest athlete on the team, something that I think is really cool and unique about rugby is there is very much like a wide age range of folks
Yeah.
on a team from like early 20s to like people in their mid to late 30s. Do you have like, when I turn this age, I'm going to retire, or when I wake up and I have to do 45 minutes of stretching in the morning, I'll retire? Like what is your benchmark?
No, honestly, I'm already at that. I gotta wake up and do so much prep just to be like there. So
Yeah.
that's not my line. No, I think I've kind of said that I think like I'm looking towards LA as probably like that's my next goal. But I don't know what my life's gonna look like after LA. I think it's really gonna depend on how my body feels. I haven't been playing rugby necessarily for that long. I mean, it's been like 8 years now, but in like comparatively to people playing Olympic sports, I haven't really been playing it for that long. But I've been an athlete my whole life. So, to a certain extent, there's wear and tear on the body, and rugby is a full contact sport. So I think. I think it's really just going to come down to how I feel, and if I feel like I can still compete to the level that I need to compete to be on this team. I don't want to kind of ever be pushed out quietly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really want to be like, I'm continuing to play because I can still do this, and I think I can still do this really well, and I can still be one of the best players in the world, and I want to still be doing this, and I think that that's such a huge part. So I'm not really sure what life will look like after LA. I think it's really going to depend on how I feel, but I think it's going to be hard for me to ever be like, yeah, no, this is it, journey done, because I love it so much. So, and now it's literally my entire world. So I don't know. I really don't know what it's going to look like, but I think it will probably come down to how my body feels at a certain extent, and if I think I can still hang, because like right now I'm about to turn 31, and we have 18-year-olds on the team. And so there's already a certain extent where I can see that like it's taking me a lot longer to get ready to go than these young kids who just throw their cleats on and get out there. But I still feel like I can compete right now, and I still feel like I can very much do this. And so I guess it'll be kind of after LA, it'll be like, can I still do this? Do I still want to do this? And I think that'll be a conversation I have to have with myself. But definitely staying in the fight for as long as I can.
When you do eventually get to that point, what do you want your legacy to be when you look back at your career?
Another very good question. That's a hard, a
And I'm
hard
sure it is
question.
hard to answer, especially when you're so much still in it and have very high, like, goals for yourself, but, I mean, just kinda talking about the growth of rugby and, just the way that kids are able to grow up with it now, like, is there something that maybe, like, you wanna be working with a youth program afterwards? Do you want to, like, I don't know. I'll let you take it from there, but where does your head go to when you think of your legacy?
Well, I think like I want to be remembered as being like an awesome teammate, and I want to be known as somebody who kind of pushed the standard of USA Rugby and what it means to be on the USA Women's Sevens team. Like that's something that I want to be known for, as somebody who like worked their ass off and pushed the standards of this team, and worked really hard for the people next to them. Um, I think that's going to be really important for me, and I think just knowing that we did all we could to kind of keep inspiring young girls and like being a good role model for and a good ambassador for this game, and just kind of like showing how amazing rugby is. I think that that's kind of like comes out of all the other stuff, but I think that
Mhm.
like looking back, that's something that I'm gonna hope that I have done.
More work to be done before that. I hope that you make it to the Olympics and get that gold medal.
That's the plan. We're gonna do everything we can.
Couple years before that, but Kristi, it was such a pleasure truly to sit down with you, get to know you more, and just hang out and talk about rugby. Like, what
Yeah,
a
I can talk
great
about rugby any
afternoon.
day you want. It really is one of my favorite things to talk about. It's such a special sport, and I'm just gonna keep saying that everyone should get into rugby. Everyone should be a fan of rugby.
Google it and find your closest practice, show up, and you never know what could happen from there. You too
You
could be
never
like Kristi
know.
and go to the
You
Olympics.
too could be an Olympian in a few years. You never know. LA's only 3 years away.